AI is going to replace you.
AI. Artificial intelligence.
AI is getting bigger and smarter and faster than you know.
Becoming a software engineer, it's the thing in India, right? So how do those people now suddenly midway reskill?
Most technologies in their first phase tend to destroy jobs, and then because technologies create new technologies, so they essentially end up creating jobs in the process. Now, of course, jobs are created, but they may not be created for the same people who are losing their jobs, right?
So what's your prediction?
One thing that I'm reasonably sure of is that jobs will start getting destroyed, but whether jobs will be created parallelly, I really don't know.
If AI is going to do what it promises, it's going to reduce human labor, companies become more profitable because they have to hire less people. But what do you do with people who are no longer going to be able to earn, and how does that impact the economy?
So basically, one man's spending is another man's income. So if AI destroys jobs, it starts having an impact on everything, right? So, if people don't make enough money, how do they pay taxes? So where does the government earn money from?
Or is there credible reason to be worried about?
In the short term, we typically tend to overestimate the impact of a new technology. And in the long term, we tend to typically underestimate it.
Everyone around you is talking about artificial intelligence, AI. It's transformative. It's magical for some people. It's going to change the world as we know it. We talk about it boosting human productivity in a way that we've never seen before. But we aren't asking some uncomfortable questions around this technology. Who are the people who are going to lose out? Who are the people who are going to lose their jobs? And what if those jobs just never come back? What about an entire generation that's being told to reskill, but they have no clue about what that reskilling should really entail? I have with me Vivek Kaul, author, economist, and journalist with me today, and we're going to be talking about artificial intelligence, its impact, and how we should be thinking about this new technology. This conversation is based on a 2-part series that we've just published on newslaundry.com. I highly recommend that you read both the pieces. The first piece is free to read. The second piece is only for our subscribers. So do sign in, subscribe, and check out both these pieces. In this conversation, we're going to be talking about this technology, how it may transform jobs as we know it, the emotional impact of it, the psychological impact of it, and more importantly, we're talking about why journalists, historians, philosophers, economists, everyone needs to be talking about AI today. These conversations should not just be led by CEOs of big tech companies. Welcome, Vivek. Thank you so much for taking out the time for talking to us. So Vivek, every time I think about AI, and we've also had these discussions, I tend to oscillate between extreme optimism and then extreme pessimism. So there are times when I think that, you have this dystopian feeling, almost like when you see in movies, like it's post some nuclear holocaust, everyone's in their little dingy, isolated space. So you get a sense that AI is going to transform things in such a way that it will change humanity as we know it, human interactions, the way we live. And then you think that, okay, maybe we're all just, overreacting here. We've been here before. We've had technologies that have come in that has made us feel that, okay, this is going to change our life forever. TV was evil, radio is satanic, calculators was dangerous. Computers, we have had a movement in India where political parties were very against computers. So help us understand this in perspective from everything that we know for now. Are we overhyping what AI will do? Or is there credible reason to be worried about how things will turn out to be?
You're correct on both accounts. So yes, we are overhyping what AI will achieve in the short run, but at the same time, we need to be worried as well. So the little bit that I have studied the subject in the last few months. So, one of the things that I came across is something which is referred to as Amara's law, after a guy called Roy Amara, who was a futurist and a researcher. So what he basically says is, and I'm paraphrasing here, that in the short term, we typically tend to overestimate the impact of a new technology.
Yeah.
And in the long term, we tend to typically underestimate it. Okay. So, and this is true across a whole host of technologies over the years. Things that we now sort of take for granted, like something like electricity. To us, it's not it's not even a technology. I mean, I don't think I have heard anyone in the last few decades that I have been on this earth use the term electricity and technology together. But electricity is a technology, and it's a general purpose technology which all of us do use. So for electricity to start showing up in the economic numbers, it took more than a few decades. And the same is, I mean, this is a subject which is very, very well studied, and it's true across different technologies. So let me give you a few examples. So the most recent example, which all of us can relate to, is that of the internet, right?
Yeah.
So the internet started making its way into popular imagination sometime from the mid to late 1990s. And this is when the dot-com bubble happened, largely in the US and in other parts of the world. And we were told that dot-com is going to take over the world. But that did not really happen. I mean, so many companies which listed in the US were destroyed. And one company which has really survived that era is Amazon. Right? And Amazon has changed our worlds in not so little ways. So, internet is now a very important part of our lives, but it took anywhere from 2 to 3 decades to get there from when the world first started talking about it. I mean, obviously, internet has been around since the 1960s, but that was a different version of the internet. It wasn't a retail version. One example I found very, very interesting is that of electric vehicles. Now, electric vehicles are a buzzword these days, but they first came around in the early 1900s. Okay, not in the early 2000s, in the early 1900s. And it is only now that they're making their way all across the world because obviously, we are now worried about the environment. But in India, they're still not very popular because the charging infrastructure continues to suck.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, there are, railways is a great example. The steam engine is a great example. So technology takes its time to come around. And so basically, there is a difference in, what one can call the advance of a technology and its adoption. Okay. And there are reasons for it, right? So the technology itself may be in its best form, but whether it's ready for adoption depends on a whole host of other things. So one example that I quite really liked while I was researching this piece is that of tractors, right? So tractors were supposed to change US farming in a big way. And that also took a lot of time. And I came across this very interesting story in the New York Times, which basically said that in 1921, there were around 246,000 tractors in the US, working on US farms, but there were 17 million horses. So it was just cheaper to use a horse. It was just cheaper to use a human being instead of a tractor. So tractor again took its time. Or to give you a more recent example of how everyone is now talking about the fact that AI is going to destroy jobs in Indian IT companies, or how Indian IT companies are going to get destroyed, and the stock market obviously has started taking that into account, and the market capitalization of Indian IT companies has fallen big time, recently. So. Now, will AI destroy jobs in Indian IT companies? Yes, it is. It already is. But again, the fears may be overblown because, see, what happens is that a lot of IT systems, now, the way to understand it is that IT systems are basically legacy IT systems, right? So they're already in place. Now, to suddenly introduce AI in it and to at the same time make sure that system is working properly is not going to be very easy. So these guys will continue to be around for a while. that will give them, and if they are good enough and if they're thinking through this, which I'm sure they are, it will give them some time to sort of think up of other ways of making money. Now, of course, they'll not be as, they won't employ as many people as they have. But I mean, I am a little skeptical about the fact that they're not going to be, or that they're going to become completely irrelevant. I mean, I think that fear is overblown.
I want to go back to your piece where basically you talk about the Industrial Revolution and you
Right.
say that even if you look at something, now we think of it as a good thing, that finally the outcome of it was for the better.
Right.
But you argue that it takes a long time for that pain to recede and for things to actually come to a point where you look back at something and say, अच्छा अच्छे के लिए हुआ जो हुआ था.
Uh-huh.
So उसी में how do we look at AI? Because I think one clear difference here is that the speed at which things are happening with regards to AI technology, how it's improving month on month, year on year, the vast variety of things that it's able to do. I mean, I guess the speed, we haven't encountered the speed before, which is what's maybe scaring us.
Yeah, I mean, the speed, of course, is an issue. And, the other fact that makes this technology different from some of the previous ones is the fact that AI is essentially coming for the human mind.
Yeah.
Now, technologies in the past were essentially, a little more physical in their nature. I mean, if I may put it that way. That is another thing that we need to understand. Now, talking about the Industrial Revolution, and what I found very, very interesting is the fact that, as you said, with the benefit of hindsight, the Industrial Revolution that happened first in the UK and then, in across the US and Europe, changed the world for good, right? And, you and I would not be using things that we are currently using if the Industrial Revolution had not happened. So a great example of that is the invention of electricity. And, electricity, other than doing what it does, led to creation of so many other things, right from, washing machine to automobiles to, whatnot. But here's the interesting thing, the Industrial Revolution in the UK essentially started in the textile industry, right? So textile industry in the UK in the 1700s used to employ a lot of skilled artisans, and the machines essentially ended up replacing these artisans. And the beautiful thing is that given that UK has been maintaining data for a very long time, unlike many other countries in the world, so you have numbers, and what the numbers tell us is essentially very scary, because if you look at the incomes in the UK from around 1765, when the first leg of the Industrial Revolution was on, and up until 1820, they were essentially, they fell and then they were stagnant. And this is obviously, we were, the data adjusts for inflation. So what that tells us is that there was and in fact, there were there were around 3 generations which paid the cost for the first leg of the Industrial Revolution in the UK.
3 generations.
3 generations, yeah. 65 years. So basically, 2 to 3 is a good number. So here's the thing, right? What does a technology do? So the technology essentially improves productivity, right? And what is productivity? Productivity is more output for the same input, or for less input. Now, what is input essentially here? Input, essentially, one of the inputs, of course, is labor, right? The work that you and I do. So if one person can essentially end up doing more work, then you require fewer persons. And this is how a lot of new technologies start. And they do end up destroying a lot of jobs. So what I have understood, and I'm also sort of simplifying a little here. It's not as simple. So most technologies in their first phase tend to destroy jobs, and then because technologies create new technologies, so they essentially end up creating jobs in the process. Now, of course, jobs are created, but they may not be created for the same people who are losing their jobs, right? They may not be created even at the same point of time or the same places or whatever, so there are, a lot of these nuances which tend to get lost in the whole debate around technology, because, it's easy to sell a simple story, right? So which is what tends to happen. So this is, so I would essentially say that when it comes to AI, the impact, at least for the next 4 to 5 years, is being overblown. The real story should start in the late 2020s or the early 2030s. 2029, 2030 and so on is what I can figure out from whatever I've...
And then do you think it'll follow? So what's your prediction? Or what's your... I don't want to say prediction, but since you've studied... since you've spent so much time reading, thinking about this, 2029, 2030 onwards, will it be the same path as what previous technologies have followed? That, some jobs go and then there's pain and then more jobs come and then everything is back to the balance? Or do you foresee this as something as majorly disruptive, something that we haven't seen before?
That's a difficult question to answer, Manisha. I don't have a straightforward answer for that. But what I would basically like to say here is that the direction of any new technology is not preordained. So what that basically means is that, I don't know whether 5 years down the line, one thing that I'm reasonably sure of is that jobs will start getting destroyed. But whether jobs will be created parallelly, I really don't know. Whether newer jobs will be created parallelly. But yes, as I said, in the short term, we overestimate it, and in the long run, we underestimate it. So I think things will start changing majorly in the next 4 to 5 years. And jobs will be destroyed. There is no two ways about it. That's one thing I'm sure of. How soon will newer jobs be created? Whether people whose jobs have been destroyed will be skillful enough to take on new jobs, I don't know. So.
Yeah. And also reskilling into what is also not clear.
It's not so, which is what I'll tell you something. I've had these conversations with a few parents in the recent past. I don't know why they keep calling me up thinking that I have the answers, but when I don't. So basically parents are now worried as to which path should their child take. Okay. And it's very scary. I don't have kids, so I obviously don't experience. I'm lucky enough to not experience that feeling. But to sort of stretch this a little, when my parents needed to make a decision as to what should I do, which I didn't let them do. But let's say when people, parents of people like me needed to make a decision as to what their child should do, and if the child was not very academically inclined, and assuming that the parents had a little bit of money going around, it was not a very difficult problem to solve, right? So you could send at least in the early 90s, you could send the child to Karnataka and give some donation and get the child to become an engineer. If you had a little more money, you could give a lot more donation and ensure that the child became a doctor. So there are so many examples in my family where people have taken this route. So you could throw money at the problem and you could hope to solve it, right? And if you were very well connected and if you had a lot of money to throw, then you could obviously manage things at a much higher level where, if questions were being leaked for a competitive exam, you could have access to that and those. But now the problem is not solvable through this. This is not a problem where you can throw more money and solve it. For the simple reason that, let's say you manage to get your child admitted into what is supposed to be the course to do at any given point of time, at that point of time. By the time the child graduates, or let's say even a couple of, few years after the child graduates, that specialization might become irrelevant or may not be as relevant as it was.
Yeah.
So how do you train for systems, AI systems, which have not yet been invented? Now, how do you answer a question like this? I don't know. So which is why, I'm sure there are people out there who have answers to such questions. I mean, I'm sure people who understand AI well enough, or who also understand the societal impact of AI well enough to be able to answer such questions. But these people are not they're not your average career counselor. They're not like the average career counselors who are going around, right? So just saying ki, like they used to say ki padhoge, likhoge, banoge nawab, or khiloge, kudoge to hoge kharab. So that doesn't apply anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, it just doesn't. A good education is no longer a guarantee that
For
you
your
will have
relevance.
you will manage to be relevant, or you will manage to continue. You will manage to earn money, and
Yeah.
or just it's not even about money. I mean, having a job gives you so much meaning in life. I mean,
Yeah.
even if the job itself may not be something that you like doing, but a sense of routine.
Sense of routine, sense of self-worth, sense of your own assessment vis-a-vis your
sense of,
peers.
having meeting people, social interaction.
Yeah.
So all that.
Exactly, like becoming a software engineer, it's the thing in India, right? You are like what you're saying, donations, loans, coaching classes, there's a whole industry around it, and suddenly you see the speed at which it may just not be required anymore. So how do those people now suddenly midway reskill? And reskill into what is...
I don't know. I honestly don't know.
So
And
some of the AI guys, the guys who are at the forefront of this technology, say that what will be more useful now is humanities. So your engineering, your science, you were always told that those are the most important things, but maybe now being human, empathy, jobs that require you to have some sort of skill at human interaction would be more valuable in the future.
It's true. So to give you, a sense, give you an example. So look at what is happening in West Asia right now, right? Now, anyone who studied a little bit of history or understands a little bit of geopolitics, understands a little bit of economic history, is at a slight advantage than a normal engineer or a normal CA, right?
Yeah.
Who anyway have extremely specialized degrees. But then, this is again, it's not an easy social change to make, right? If you look at an average Indian family, how many fathers who are basically the decision makers would be comfortable with the idea of their sons, not daughters, sons, studying arts, right? I mean, it's not such a straightforward decision. And again, let's say one decides to study sociology or geography or history. Do we have the teachers? I mean, so there are. I mean, this is just way beyond.
And also the vast number of. I was joking with my friend that what happens to all these engineers? She's like, they'll become journalists. Your jobs will go. So. These vast number of people who've educated could also move into other fields with their skill sets. Need not be that they will relearn something.
The point is, if journalism was creating jobs, then yes.
That's
it's not like journalism is creating thousands. I mean, journalism anyway was never creating thousands of jobs, right?
Yeah.
It was basically a few hundred jobs or whatever. So
one of the things that I think about this whole AI conversation that we're having, and which is why we wanted you to write a piece on it, is that much of the conversation on this is being led by CEOs, people who are going to benefit directly from this technology and telling us that it's going to change everything, that we don't need human beings anymore, we are going to have a superhuman mind, and all those things that Sam Altman goes around saying. And there's very few, say, historians, economists, journalists, policy guys talking about this. I think for the impact that this will have on our lives, there's very little of people from all walks of lives dissecting the technology as they should. And why do you think that's happening?
So let me just quote someone who I have, used in the piece that I have written for Newslaundry. So there's a gentleman called David Egerton. He's a historian of science, okay, and in a book called The Shock of the Old, Technology and Global History Since 1900, he essentially writes, too often the agenda for discussing the past, present and future of technology is set by promoters of new technologies, okay. And the reason is simple. They have an incentive to do so, even though, as we have discussed, the time of maximum use of the technology is typically decades away from invention, right? So this is like a very straightforward reason for what is happening now. To put some numbers into this, so I recently came across a report by an Indian mutual fund called DSP. So they essentially have estimated that the capital expenditure of technology companies on the entire AI project has been close to $1 trillion. Now that is a lot of money. Okay. Now in current Indian rupees, it would be almost 94 lakh crore. Okay. So obviously a lot of money has been thrown at this. So they need to talk it up, right? So to ensure that it essentially is relevant, right? So they have an incentive to do that. So which is why you hear all these technology guys talking up AI, and given that they are the people with the money, they are the money bags. So they set the what I have called the mahal in the piece. So they set the mahal around AI, right? So you will see them at all the conferences speaking. They'll be the keynote speakers and so on and so forth. And the media also has lapped it up because it essentially is an easy way to make money, right? So you do a conference, you call an AI guy, and you get advertising and so on and so forth. So for these guys, it is very, very important to keep talking up AI. Okay, and given the fact that the market capitalization of some of these companies has gone through the roof on the fact that AI will deliver something special in the days to come. So that is one reason. Then what also happens is that, and the techno-optimism that they end up creating essentially influences CEOs of other companies to talk about AI, right? So it's essentially...
Governments in our case.
Governments, of course, and
like,
governments.
I don't know why UP government was promoting Kumbh as AI-powered Kumbh. And we didn't know what that meant. Like, what did they mean by AI-powered Kumbh?
It's just it's a buzzword that gets attached. No, so for CEOs also, if they keep talking about AI, it's an easy way to find their way into the media, right? It's essentially like you are being quoted everywhere, you're being seen everywhere, and you don't have to pay for it. So in a way, it's good publicity, right? So, and also see, there is another thing at work here. For John Maynard Keynes, the great British economist, once said that worldly wisdom teaches us that it is better for reputation to fail conventionally rather than unconventionally. What that basically means is that you would rather be wrong when everyone else is wrong than be wrong in your own unique way, right? Because if everyone else is wrong, you can easily justify it by saying, sabne galti ki, to maine kya alag kiya, right? So which is why all this, CEOs are sort of jumping onto the AI bandwagon. And no one wants to be left behind. No one wants to be told 4 years down the line, ki, look, boss, AI has worked and you are not on it. Now, if 4 years down the line, AI does not work, everyone was on it. So which is why it's again, the incentive is such that companies have also sort of...
What are we missing in this? Are there some key questions that we are missing in this conversation led by CEOs and...
Yeah, so if you look at the little data that has come out on implementation of AI in companies, at least it's really not working. So if you Forbes had recently done a piece which I happened to read, and the conclusion that one drew from that piece is that the money being spent on AI by companies has not really returned much. Okay. And I would, in fact, I have linked that piece into my AI piece for newslaundry, and I would suggest that readers should click on it and try reading it as well to get a broader perspective. So that is also see it's like a lot of large firms or firms in general, even medium firms for that matter, like the idea of using an algorithm to drive down costs. Okay, so let me just give you a very recent example. Now, I had asked for someone, I had booked for a person to come and clean my AC on Urban Company, okay? And something went wrong, and I tried a multiple, they couldn't do what I wanted to do. And they didn't, even before they sort of came to do the work, they told me it can't be done. Now I wanted to complain, okay? And all I got was AI chatbots. And I just couldn't reach a human being.
Yeah,
to
that's true for
explain
many.
a very basic problem, okay? This is the service I wanted, and I am not getting this. So how do I get this service? I mean, I don't think it's an unreasonable question to ask. I mean, I was not asking for my money back or, I just couldn't reach a human being. So then I wrote to them on Twitter and someone called. And I mean, eventually the problem was not solved. But so my thing is, how, call center employees are the absolute bottom of the pyramid.
Yeah.
And they don't cost much, especially for a company like Urban Company, which is anyway spending a huge amount of money on discounting, right? But they still don't. And this is not just, I mean, I'm just offering Urban Company as an example, but it is true for all these VC funded, right? Pretty much. You don't get to a human being easily. You don't get to a human being easily, even on Zepto, if you've ever tried complaining. Now, why are they doing this? It doesn't, because I don't think it's much of a cost, but it's just that they like this idea, okay? And so that is another, and also see what happens is AI in a sense also becomes a negotiating tool, right? You can use the threat of AI to essentially not give your employees the right salaries or not give them good increments. I think the increment part is already happening.
When you are already driving home this point that you're replaceable, then your negotiating power
this goes up.
Yeah.
So also, see, again, in the era that we live in, most of the firms, the CEOs running firms, other than their salaries, also have a lot of ESOPs, and the value of the ESOP goes up as long as the share price keeps going up. And when you sort of can talk about such things that we are using AI to drive down costs and all that, so that helps. So it's just that the system is set up in such a way that it makes sense for the tech bros to keep talking about AI, and it makes sense for the CEOs to keep talking about AI. So, I mean, I'll give you a very simple example, So in my daily life, I keep writing about, investing, stock market, this, that, that is what pays my bills. Now, so I like to call these guys people in the business of managing other people's money, OPM. Now, if you ever talk to any of these OPMs, be it fund managers, brokers, analysts, this, that, they will tell you, and this I speak from close to 22, 23 years of experience of doing this. They will keep telling you that the stock market is going up and today is the right time to buy. All of them. I mean, it's not, there would be an odd guy here or there who will say, nahi, abhi theek nahi lag raha hai. Aur wo bhi aapko off the record bolega. So why are they doing this? They are doing this because, they're incentivized to do this. The more money that gets invested through them, the more money their firm makes, the more money they make. So it's just that how the incentive is set up. And because these guys are by far are large advertisers in the business media and even in the general media, so the media also never sort of does any negative pieces, and you will keep seeing these puff pieces. हाँ भैया अभी बाजार गिरा है पर अभी ऊपर जाएगा. तो जैसे which is happening as we speak, right? So the stock market has fallen, and all these guys who are saying that you should buy stocks when the market was at its peak are still saying, you should buy stocks because prices have fallen, right? So, boss, you can't be right both ways, right? If you, and they're saying that you should buy stocks now because the prices are more in line with earnings, what companies are making. So, boss, if the prices are now more in line with earnings, they were not more in line with earnings when they had gone through the roof, right? So, you can't be recommending it both ways, but they do that. That is how the incentive is.
So coming back to AI, now I do think that maybe in 4 years or 5 years, it's going to come and it will transform workplace to quite an extent. And I'm saying this as a journalist who's seen what AI tools can do for journalists within newsrooms, whether it's editing, ideating, strategizing. And here's what I am worried about, or I'm thinking about quite deeply. One is that, when you become a journalist, and I started off on the desk editing, you really had to suck for a long time to then get better. Typically you have 7 years of your bosses telling you you're terrible, you don't know how to frame a sentence, this is a shit copy, it's a shit headline, you don't know how to give blurbs. And then you learn and then you get better. And I'm seeing that with AI, that 7 years, I can do away with training that person for 7 years. Essentially, the people who start off and mid-level, I can easily replace with AI tools. And the worry is that it's not about losing jobs. It's about how do you even enter the workforce now. So if AI replaces, and I'm saying especially in journalism, I don't know how it works in other, CEOs are telling us tech guys are telling us we won't need CEOs and all. But to me, I think the entry level is pretty much the intern, the entry level. The mid level has to really worry about what's going to happen, because I see AI tools to be able to do their work very quickly, very efficiently, without a senior person having to waste their time explaining why they're wrong, what makes their copy better. So, but with that worry, so you can cut costs and everything, but the worry is that 10 years from now, 15 years from now, when no one's entering the workforce, making mistakes to get better, then how are we going to build something for the future? Like, what would it look like in the future? So that's one worry. And I think, but then I also think of, when you're talking about overhyping, I recognize that people are already very good at detecting AI content. Like, अगर कोई AI thumbnail होता है तो लोग एकदम से बोलते थे, अरे don't use AI. I can tell when a tweet is written on AI and it's, you know कि ChatGPT का is soulless है. It's usually saying nothing, it's just words. So as humans, we are also very quick at understanding what's machine, what's human, which is a good sign. It means that journalism, storytelling, reporting will continue to remain relevant because you can tell what the machine is doing. So I'm just throwing this at you in terms of not just journalism, but future of workplace. When you don't have young people entering and training, you're taking that layer off. तो फिर बचे सिर्फ सीनियर्स, और वो कब तक जिंदा रहेंगे, और उसके जब वो चले जाएंगे तो रिप्लेस कौन करेगा और क्या करेगा. And also the opposite to this is that I think maybe we're just overhyping all of this, because I feel like we are very good at detecting, like I said, what's human, what's not. And I think we have a sense of like, it's not human enough, so it's not nice enough kind of a thing, which possibly will save jobs ahead because people will crave that.
Okay, so so let's look at journalism first, right? So if you read any of the newspapers these days in the physical form, you will see that almost all illustrations are now done by AI, right? So the illustrators have lost their jobs, right? So, but here's the thing, and every time you see a sort of a shot of that AI image on the social media, you have a lot of people commenting, as you said, that why are you using AI and this and that. But do you think that the Malik log are really bothered about this? Right. So that is the question, right? And it's a matter of, if they keep hammering it, they will, people will eventually get used to it. And also, what is to say that AI will not get better at creating images, right? AI might just get better at creating images. It's also a function of the fact that some of the prompting that is happening is not proper.
Yeah.
Right. So, I have created, I remember one sort of prompt that I gave to essentially create a New Yorker-like cartoon about something that was happening in India. And the cartoon that I got was very, very New Yorker-like. So it's like, people are not prompting properly. So I don't think, it's once this takes off, and it's also about people getting used to, okay? So once people get used to reading AI content, so they'll get used to it, right? And see, so there are two things. One is there are people out there who essentially go and put a prompt in AI, and then whatever rubbish gets generated, they just
paste it,
publish it, right? So that is one way of doing it. And of late, I have seen some senior editors do this on the West Asia crisis. Now, of course, they are not. See, you cannot be as an editor I mean, if you're an editor of a media house, of a daily or whatever, of a website in India, your chances of being a West Asia expert are very low. No, of course. I mean, because an editor is a generalist.
Yeah.
Right, he's a generalist. No, this is not to say that there would be people out there who would have a reasonable amount of understanding, right? But there are editors who need to constantly keep generating content, and you can see that they're doing it through Gemini.
Yeah.
It's very clear. But here's the thing, right? Now, what if someone is writing with some clarity and then uses AI to improve that clarity?
Yeah,
right?
that is pretty good.
That is a very good, in fact, that gives you, I mean, if you let's say write on a particular issue, and if you ask AI as to, are you missing out on, some basic point, which should be a part of this piece. Now, AI will give you 10 things there, okay? And 9 of the things will be rubbish. But you need to be mentally aware and professional enough to understand that 90% is rubbish, but this one point is interesting.
So now the question comes that for you to detect that one point is important is your years of training, right?
Exactly.
Now,
पढ़ा लिखा होना जरूरी है.
हाँ, जो भी आपका प्रोफेशन है उसमें आपने टाइम लगाया है years. अब AI comes for that. So then what happens to quality 20 years down the line?
Which is why I have been getting calls from parents who want me to give them research projects. Right? So that the kid can figure out how to think. So the kid can figure out how to link multiple data points and come up with a coherent thought. Right? But I mean, how many people are going to get that kind of opportunity?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And how many, in fact, I mean, to be very honest, how many parents are smart enough to be thinking about all this, right?
Yeah.
And
how we are grappling with basics in India. We're grappling with English. Ki English sikha lo,
exactly.
conversations kara lo.
Upper middle class, people like you and I, or people monetarily in a better position than you and I are, they probably have the money and the time to think about these things. बट जो बंदा हर रोज स्ट्रगल कर रहा है वो कहाँ से, मतलब हाउ विल दे थिंक अबाउट, आई मीन डू दे इवन नो अबाउट दीज थिंग्स? सो वेयर डू यू स्टार्ट?
And but my thing is also that even for somebody like us, there would be these whiz editors in newsrooms who could turn a copy around and they could, and you learned from them, and like I said, you really sucked at something to then get better at. If you take out the right to suck at something and it's going to be perfection through, then I don't know how we'll reach a point where...
So which is why, if you look at
I mean, you should have the right to be bad at something. It's also taking your right to just be bad at something and get better. Yeah, and get better.
Right to figure out, boss. I mean, in my case, I didn't land up in journalism straight. I mean, I did my MBA in information systems, worked for an IT company, sucked at it, quit, then tried doing a PhD. Somehow I ended up where I did. The point is, you are taking away the right of people, of youngsters to make mistakes and learn from their mistakes. You can't be good, and of course there are guys who are smart and they're good enough at what they do from day one, but most people pick up skills as they go along, right? Yeah. So that if the lower layer of organizations does not really recruit, then what do you do? I mean, a great example is that how financial companies in India are now using AI to sell and give out loans. Like extremely low level, low end, you are a graduate or essentially you are an MBA from, let's say, a 3-tier or a 4-tier MBA institute. You get into a bank, you go sell credit cards or you sell loans. So it is a starting point. It is not the best starting point. It is a starting point. But if banks start using AI or NBFCs start using AI to sell these loans, then what do you do?
So my last question to you is, what does this do to a broader economy? Because if AI is going to do what it promises, it's going to reduce human labor, companies become more profitable because they have to hire less people. But what do you do with people who are no longer going to be able to earn, and how does that impact the economy? Because the thing is that job, like we said, it's about self-worth, it's about peers, it's about friendships, learning things. It's also basically about money. You having to buy a house, you being able to buy a car. So us being employed, and this is so basic, it basically ensures that everything else in the economy keeps going, the same consumption होता रहेगा. तो अगर हम वो ही हिट कर देते हैं कि अब इतने वास्ट नंबर ऑफ जॉबलेस पीपल हैं, एंड सैम ऑल्टमन्स Elon Musk's solution is universal basic income, which we are not going to have. But when that happens, how does it impact every other sector? Like what happens to the auto industry, for example, when no one can buy a two-wheeler, which is at the start of when you're, moving from one class to the other?
So again, it's a difficult question to answer, but I have written this piece multiple times in the last 10 years where I say that robots don't take toilet breaks. Okay. Which it means what it means. So basically that is one reason as to why companies love the idea of AI, right? Because they don't, a human being is not, may not necessarily be productive at all points of time. And then there are variable costs. You have to keep giving them a salary, you have to give them leaves, they will be unwell, they would want to have kids. So AI essentially takes all this out of the equation. But what it also does on the other level is that ultimately, any economy, a large part of it is driven by the money that you and I spend on things, right? So basically, one man's spending is another man's income, right? One human spending is another human's income. So if AI destroys jobs, as it is likely to in at least in its first phase, and we don't know as to what kind of jobs it will create in the years to come. And again, if you study the history of the Industrial Revolution, no one really knew the kind of jobs that would end up being created. So how do you plan for that, right? So again, it starts having an impact on everything, right? So, if people don't make enough money, how do they pay taxes? If they don't...
Where does the government earn?
Yeah, so where does the government earn money from? So if the people don't consume enough, again, how do they pay taxes? Direct, and this is indirect taxes. So then is universal basic income the way out? Okay, let's say universal basic income is the way out. Where does the money for that come from? Does the government, in order to pay a universal basic income, tax corporate profits at extremely high rates? Is that going to be possible, given that, the people running AI companies, have essentially got a lot of politicians in their pockets. So, there are so many questions. How does it impact a generation of people mentally? How do they become fodder for politicians? If you look at what happened, what has happened in the US and other parts of the world in the post-globalization era, where a whole host of industry has moved from the US and from Europe to Southeast Asia, China, and so on and so forth. So there are just a huge number of questions which are neither being forget people answering these questions. They are not even being asked. And we continue to let people who are going to benefit from the success of AI, we continue to let them set the agenda around it. Okay, so, I'd like to quote from a book that I have used in this piece that I have written. So there's a gentleman called Richard Susskind who has followed AI for a while. So what he says is that, and he talks, this is basically a comment on tech bros and people, essentially promoting techno-optimism all the time. So he says we need to rise above the homespun philosophizing that is popular in the tech community. Platitude is not principle, right? So how do you go beyond all this? I don't see enough historians talk about AI, sociologists or economists,
Yeah.
or even government reports for that matter. I mean, I have been trying. I mean, I've been wanting to read something relevant on how AI is going to impact India, and all I get is techno optimism everywhere.
Yeah.
It can't be like that, right? I mean, I'm okay with, one has to be optimistic about the future, but it's not. What history really tells us very clearly is that technology has its negative sides as well. So why are we not talking about it? Also, one needs to understand a large parts of the Western world are now consumption societies. So what happens to their economic growth? And if they don't spend money, a lot of that, a lot of money that they spend ends up in India or in countries like India or in other parts of the developing world. So what happens to that? What happens to economic growth? What happens to, as I said, the psychological benefits of working? The inequality anyway has gone up in the last few decades. How does it impact us when it goes up even more? So, so there are, hundreds of such questions which are really not being, thought through or being answered for that matter. So,
to go through all those questions, I think you readers should catch Vivek Kaul's 2-part series on Newslaundry. It's looking at this big question of AI, how it will impact jobs, and the conversations we should be having about AI. Do catch this on newslaundry.com. Thank you so much, as always, Vivek, for taking out
Thanks,
the time
Sophie.
to talk to us and take us
Thanks.
through this very important conversation. I hope we keep having these.
Sure.
Thank you.